We are going to be in Genesis chapter 41 tonight, and we're going to be looking at, we're going to pick up in verse 37, so we're in Genesis chapter 41, but we're going to pick up in verse 37. But before we get there, for those who were here last week, what were some of the things that we talked about? What were some of the big ideas? What's some of the main events, the big things that are going on so far in the life of Joseph? Some of the things we talked about last week.
Joseph, kind of the analogy from when he was younger and in the pit and getting losing his coat, and then when he's in Egypt, kind of the same kinds of events are happening to him that makes him become more humble. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Picking up on some of those little threads, some of those themes. Joseph has his clothing removed, and then as he's coming up out of the pit, we could say, he gets those clothing put back on him. He gets some new clothing, you could say. Anybody else? What are some of the things we talked about? Anybody remember?
God is working out his plan through Joseph.
Yes, that's right. God's working.
Even Joseph getting out of prison and everything, because this is the life. I mean, Christ is coming through this line, so God had a plan.
That's right. That's right. God had a plan. He's coming through this line of Jacob, and Joseph is going to be in a position that God is going to use that. Absolutely. Anybody got anything else that we talked about last week?
Well, Joseph's wife Potiphar's wife, wanted him to lie with her, and he did not.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. He was a man of character, right? He's a man of character. He's a man of morals, and we see that. He's able to stand up to temptation, a daily temptation, over and over and over again. He's able to stand up to temptation. So, absolutely. So Joseph has been in prison for up to what we talked about last week. He's in prison for 2 years. He's been forgotten by the cupbearer. Remember that he talks to the cupbearer? It was 2 years. He's been in prison for 2 years after he gave the cupbearer his interpretation and said, hey, don't forget me. But then we find out that Pharaoh has 2 dreams, and nobody in Egypt can interpret those dreams. And the cupbearer finally remembers Joseph, and he says to Pharaoh, there is a guy who can interpret dreams. He's in prison. I forgot about him. He's in prison. And then, of course, Joseph gives the interpretation of Pharaoh's dreams, and he gives him some advice as to what to do as well. Those are some of the things we talked about. Anybody got anything that comes to mind before we jump into the next portion? Okay. All right. Can I get somebody who would like to read verses 37 through 45? So we're going to be Genesis chapter 41. I need somebody who would like to read 37 to 45. If that's you, let me know.
I will.
Okay.
Ready?
Very good.
Now the proposal seemed good to Pharaoh and to all of his servants. Then Pharaoh said to his servants, can we find a man like this in whom is a divine spirit? So the Pharaoh said to Joseph, since God has informed you of all of this, there is no one so discerning and wise as you are. You shall be over my house, and according to your command, all my people shall do homage. Only in the throne I will be greater than you. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, see, I have set you over all the land of Egypt. Then Pharaoh took off his signet ring from his hand and put it on Joseph's hand, and clothed him in garments of fine linen, and put the gold necklace around his neck. And he had him ride in his second chariot, and they proclaimed before him, bow the knee, and he set them over all the land of Egypt. Moreover, Pharaoh said to Joseph, though I am Pharaoh, yet without your permission no one shall raise his hand or foot in all the land of Egypt. Then Pharaoh named Joseph Zephanath, Paniah, and gave him Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, priest of On, as his wife. And Joseph went forth over the land of Egypt.
Very good, very good. Some of those names are difficult. Did a good job, though. All right, so in verses 37 to 45, what does Pharaoh do after Joseph gives him that interpretation of the dream and gives him the advice, right? Because what we saw last week was Joseph comes on the scene, he gives Pharaoh he interprets the dream, and then he gives him advice. And so what does Pharaoh do?
He gives him charge over all his land.
Yeah. He gives him charge over all the land. He basically says something along the lines of, okay, yeah, and you're the right guy for the job. You know, that's good advice. You know, you should probably do it. So he puts Joseph in charge. What else does he do with Joseph? This is something that we just talked about. Something continues to happen to Joseph. What else does he do? Look at verse 42.
He took off his ring from his hand and put it upon Joseph's hand.
That's right. And then what else?
And arrayed him in vestures of fine linens and put a gold chain about his neck.
Absolutely. So again, what we're seeing is the clothing of Joseph, the putting on of garments again. So that's an important theme that we see throughout the life of Joseph. So absolutely. So Joseph is put in charge. He gets some new clothing, and he is now second in command. He is at the right hand of power. He is at the right hand of authority. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's right. He's at the right hand, right? He's second in command. All right, so what had God revealed to Joseph when he was 17 years old? When he was 17 years old, he was still in his father's household. What had God revealed to him? Anybody remember the dreams?
That the sun and the moon and the stars would bow down before him.
Yeah, he ends up having two dreams, and that's right. That's one of those dreams that all the sun, the moon, the stars, the 11 stars, and all of that are going to bow down to him. He also had that dream before that one where his sheaves of grain and all of that, they were his bundle of grain stands up, and his, the other ones, which represent the brothers, bow down. So God had promised Joseph, he had revealed to Joseph that he was going to be put in charge. He was going to be exalted, that he was going to be a guy who was going to be in a position of leadership. And God is starting to fulfill that promise. Now, had God been waiting to fulfill his promise this whole time? Or had God been working out his promise from the very start?
He'd been working out his promise from the very start, been molding and shaping Joseph into maturity.
That's right. That's right. God was behind the scenes. Certainly God had his hand directly in some of the events that were going on, but also there were times when God was simply working behind the scenes. It's called the providence of God. He wasn't directly causing people to be wicked, right? He didn't make the brothers of Joseph do sinful and wicked things, but he's using that. He doesn't make Potiphar's wife be a harlot and try to, sleep with him and all of that, but he's using those things. So here's the thing. Even though we say that God is really beginning to fulfill that promise, that's it's not really true in a sense. He's not beginning to fulfill it. It's been being, started this whole time. God has been working this whole time. What we are starting to see is that God is bringing it to fulfillment. He's kind of bringing it full circle, but God has been in the midst of this whole thing the whole time. Has God been with Joseph while he was in slavery and in prison?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So this isn't like God has just now woken up and said, "Oh, let's start fulfilling some promises." No, God's been in the midst of all of it. It has been, in Joseph's life, it has been now approximately 13 years since God first made that promise to him. He was 17 years old when he had those dreams. When we meet Joseph, we meet him when he's 17, and he has those two dreams approximately around that time. So he's about 17. He goes into slavery, and he is in slavery in Potiphar's house for somewhere around 10 years, something around 10 years he's in slavery. And we don't really get the feel of it, right? A lot of times what happens in Genesis is huge, portions of time will go by, and it'll, as we read it, it will kind of seem like it was the next day or a couple weeks later or something like that. No, there's been a long period of time. And so Joseph was in slavery for approximately 10 years. He goes into prison. He's put in prison for probably about a year before he meets the cupbearer and the baker. And then he's left in prison for another 2 years before he ever gets out, and the cupbearer remembers Joseph. So let me ask you this question. Does it sometimes take God a while to bring to completion or start to reveal his promises and things like that?
Yes.
Yeah. Sometimes it takes a while before we start to see the workings out of it. It's kind of like, you can think the Bible uses, did somebody want to say something? Okay. The Bible uses images of like farming and stuff like that a lot of times. So you can think about it kind of like a seed. A seed gets planted, gets put in the ground, but you don't see it spring up. You don't see it, the next day. You don't see it the day after. Slowly over time, it starts to, mature. It starts to germinate, or whatever it's called. It starts to grow and all of that. Now, we today can use time-lapse cameras and kind of see a long period of time condensed in a few minutes. But without that kind of thing, it takes a long time. You don't see it happen instantly. And that's kind of, I think, a good way that we can think about what God is doing. Sometimes it takes a long time before we see the fruit of whatever God has been working out. But he's been working it out for the whole time. And here's the thing. God's timing is always the perfect timing. God's timing is always the perfect timing. Now, do you like that?
Amen, brother.
Well, it sounds like Elaine likes that. Or at least is able to say amen to that. What about the rest of you? Do you always like waiting on God?
So
No, not always.
It's the not knowing.
Yeah, Yeah. Did Joseph know what was going to happen when he was first put in slavery under Potiphar?
He
I mean,
didn't know.
He did not.
he might have recognized somewhere God is going to do something because he gave me these dreams. But how's he going to work it out? I mean, those dreams didn't tell him you're going to be in slavery for 10 years. Then you're going to be in prison for 3 years, right? God didn't reveal all that to him. So you're right. The not knowing. Here's a question. Do we know, listen, do we know that those who are in Christ, all is going to work out?
Yes. We believe that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do we know how it's going to work out? Do we
No.
know the details?
Not always going to work out the way they want it to.
Yeah.
Right. Who here wants to go into slavery for 10 years? Anybody?
No.
Anybody want to go into prison for another 3 years?
No.
No.
No. So we don't always understand what God is doing. But if you look back, God has been working. He's been maturing, but he's also been using other people to bring about what he needs to bring about. So waiting on God is difficult. We don't always know why he's doing what he's doing, or why he's allowing what he's allowing, or how it's going to work out. Sometimes, did it look bad when Joseph was first sold into slavery? Did that look bad?
It
Look
did.
like the end of the road.
Yeah, it looked bad, didn't it? I mean,
Yes.
he didn't want to go to he didn't want to be put in slavery, so it looked bad. Did it look real bad when he was thrown in prison for a crime he didn't commit? Did that look bad?
It looked bad, yes.
Yeah. Does it look bad in your life sometimes? Do you wonder? Do you ever wonder, how can God bring something good out of this? Do you ever wonder, why me? Why is this happening?
Absolutely.
We can see it in the life of Joseph. We can see it in the life of other people. We don't always know what's going on. And I'm sure, because I know Joseph was not a superhero. I'm sure he had moments of doubt, of questioning, of wondering, why me? Why is this happening? And we go through the same things. Here's some encouragement that we can get. We can look back and we can say, my life looks bad, right? Sometimes life looks bad, but we continue to remain faithful and God will work it out in the end. It might not be the way we want it to work out. He might bring us through things that we might not want to go through. People might do things that, God's going to use, but it might not be pleasant. But in the end, we remain faithful. He's going to bring us through the end. There's good coming. That's something we need to keep in mind. There's good.
In the annual Bible passages that we're reading,
Yeah.
a lot here lately have been on, the brokenhearted or the weak or the, just the ones that are kind of down and out, but how God is there and rewards, and it kind of gives you the comfort that he's there during those low times.
Right. Absolutely. And that's one of the reasons. It's not the only reason, but that's one of the reasons why the scriptures are there for us. They're there for us that we might receive comfort, that we might receive encouragement, because we can look back and we can see the faithfulness of God throughout all kinds of things. So that's part of what's going on there. So moving back to Joseph, why does God put Joseph in charge over all Egypt? Because God is the one doing this. Why does God put Joseph in charge of
Is it
Egypt?
because of what's coming and
Yeah.
putting him in the circumstances that's going to reunite him with his father and brothers?
Absolutely. Yeah, right. So God doesn't put Joseph in charge of Egypt to make Pharaoh wealthy. That happens. He doesn't put Joseph in charge to save Egypt. That happens. God doesn't put Joseph in charge simply to save Jacob and his brothers and the whole family, although that happens, right? And that's part of what's going on. But ultimately, right, big picture, it's because through Jacob's family, the Christ is going to come, the Messiah is going to come. Through that line, we're going to have salvation for all humanity. So yes, Joseph is going to be reunited. Yes, Joseph's going to save his family as well as, Pharaoh and these other people. There's a lot of that going on. That's going to be true. That's all going to happen. But then big picture, ultimately, it's for you and me. It's for us even today. We're here in the state that we're in, not the state of Missouri, in the saved state that we're in, right? We are here because Joseph was faithful, because God put Joseph in charge over all Egypt, because he was able to rescue and save and all of that way back then. That's why we're here today. No famine is going to stop God's plan. No scheming, no cunning, no unfaithful wife, no treacherous brothers, no pagan empire is going to stop God's plan. He's going to use it all. He's going to work through it all to bring about Jesus into the world so that all humanity can be saved or can have the potential of being saved. So there's a big picture thing that's going on here. Big picture. We don't know. Joseph didn't know that we were going to be saved because he was faithful and God worked through him and saved his family, right? Joseph didn't know that. Now, if Joseph hadn't been faithful, God would still be able to use people and bring about the Messiah. But that's not what happened. Joseph was faithful. But the point is, Joseph didn't understand what was going on. Joseph didn't know that you and I were going to be saved by the blood of Christ. He didn't know Jesus was going to come on the scene and all of that through his faithfulness. You and I don't know what God is doing through us. We don't know 5 years down the line, a generation down the line, 20 generations down the line, if God doesn't return, if Christ doesn't return and all of that. We don't know what God is working out. We don't know how our faithfulness, how our trust in God is going to work out, is going to do things, right? God is going to use that to bring about wonderful things in the future. We just don't know. Just don't know. So there should be some encouragement there that God is going to use, I believe, as he used Joseph, he's going to use us through whatever happens in our lives. As we continue to be faithful to him, he's going to use all of that for his glory. We're going to be blessed, but we're going to bless other people, right? God is going to bless other people, we could say, through our faithfulness and our trusting and following in him. So big picture stuff going on. All right, anybody got anything on that they want to talk about before we move on in the text? Okay, we're going to look at verses 46 through 57. 46 through 57. Somebody else want to read? Would anybody else like to read? Genesis chapter 41, 46 through 57.
I will.
Okay, good. Thank you.
And Joseph was 37 years old when he stood before Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And Joseph went out from the presence of Pharaoh and went throughout all the land of Egypt. And in the 7 plenteous years, the earth brought forth by handfuls. And he gathered up all the food of the 7 years, which were in the land of Egypt, and laid up in the food in the cities. The food of the field, which was round about every city, laid he up in the same. And Joseph gathered corn as the sand of the sea, very much, until he left numbering, for it was without number. And unto Joseph were born 2 sons, before the years of famine came, which Antoinette, the daughter of Potiphar's Pharaoh, priest of On, bare unto him. And Joseph called the name of the firstborn Manasseh, for God said, He hath made me forget all my toil and all my father's house. And in the name of the second called he Ephraim, for God had caused me to be fruitful in the land of my affliction. And the 7 years of plenteousness that was in the land of Egypt were ended. And the 7 years of the dearth began to come, according as Joseph had said. And the earth was in all lands, but in all the land of Egypt there was bread. And when all the land of Egypt was famished, the people cried to Pharaoh for bread. And Pharaoh said unto all Egyptians, Go unto Joseph, what he said to you, do. And the famine was over in all the face of the earth. And Joseph opened all the storehouses and sold unto the Egyptians. And the famine waxed sore in the land of Egypt. And all the countries came unto Egypt to Joseph to buy corn, because that the famine was so sore in all lands.
Okay. Very good. Thank you. All right. So what happens after Joseph is put in charge in Egypt?
A famine comes about. Well,
Okay.
first the plenty, and then
That's right.
yeah.
Yeah, that's right. So first there's the years of plenty, and what is he doing? Is he taking care of things?
Yes, he is.
Yeah, he's taking care of things. He's been faithful in Potiphar's house, right? He was a good manager there. He was faithful in the prison. He was a good manager there. And again here, he's faithful over what Pharaoh has put him in charge of. He's faithful here. He's doing a good job. So we've got the 7 years of plenty. He does a great job. He takes care of it. And then there's the 7 years of famine, right? 7 years of famine happen to come on, and everything is taken away, right? They don't have anything at that point. And then it says that the whole earth came to Egypt because the famine was severe. Now, we've already talked about this, but it's okay to bring it back up again. Did Joseph and the Egyptians always see God at work and understand everything he was doing?
No.
No, there weren't. In fact, a lot of times there was no light shows. There was no miracles. In fact, we don't even see any miracles so far in the life of Joseph, do we? Are there any miracles you can think of other than a revelation given by dream, but we don't see God doing any miraculous growing or feeding of 5,000 from a couple fish or anything. We don't see any, parting of the Red Seas. We don't see anything like that, do we?
No.
No.
No, it's day-to-day life, isn't it? Day-to-day life. Here's something we need to keep in mind. A lot of times we get fixated on the miracles in the Bible and things like that. And sometimes people want miracles today. And the reality is, if you look at the majority of the life of God's people, just of all of God's people, miracles are very small. We notice it, we see it, we kind of fixate on, these big miracles that we see throughout the Bible. But if you took all of human history and all the history of God's people, you see that miracles only take up a very small portion of the time. God's not working crazy miracles to Joseph. He gives him the ability to interpret dreams. God is bringing about dreams. But, even with dreams, there's nothing miraculous about that. People have dreams all the time. We could say there's something miraculous about the divine interpretation of those dreams. But again, Pharaoh, Joseph, they're just living life. They're going through life. And what God has done and how God is working in a very real way is through the maturing of Joseph over time. I don't think God endowed Joseph with some kind of miraculous ability to manage well. I think he was working with him to grow him, to mature him, to get him to the point where he could manage first Potiphar's household. Remember, he's in Potiphar's house for 10 years. It probably took a while before he became the number one servant. And then he's in prison for 3 years, at least a year, something like that. And then he gets into another position there. So it's been a while. But the point is, God's working through the day-to-day, in and out, the mundane aspects of life. And there's no big light shows. There's no big miracles that are happening. But yet God is still at work, I want to draw your attention to verse 57 before we move on. I think pretty much what we've discovered in here is, well, we could mention for a moment in verse 46, Joseph is how old?
30.
30. He's 30 years old. We see that he ends up having 2 sons before the famine and all of that, Manasseh and Ephraim. So he's blessed by God or whatever. But then in verse 57, what does verse 57 say?
Moreover, all the earth came to Egypt.
All the earth, right? My translation, what you can see on the screen here says, moreover, all the earth came to Egypt, to Joseph to buy grain because the famine was severe over all the earth. Now, does that mean that people from Hawaii, from Japan, from Canada came to Egypt to get grain? Because it was a famine over the entire earth? Is that what that means?
It says all countries.
It says that, right? It says, mine actually says all the earth. But does it mean the globe? Does it mean that literally people from the Americas, people from Japan, people from Hawaii came to Egypt? Do we think that's really what that means?
No, I don't think so.
No, it's not. It's not. And here's a very important thing we need to keep in mind. Sometimes the Bible uses this language that sounds like it's global. I highly doubt that the entire earth, the whole globe of the earth, was having a severe famine, and that the entire globe, all of the inhabitants of the entire earth went to Egypt. First of all, even though they had 7 years of plenty and they saved up all that stuff, I'm pretty sure there wouldn't have been enough food for everybody over the entire planet to get food from Egypt. First of all, it would have taken them probably years to get there anyways, probably much more than 7 years. But we read that and we understand, I think most of us anyways, I think most of us read that and we have no problem seeing that this isn't talking about the globe. What do you think this is talking about when it says all the earth came to Joseph to get food? What do you think it's talking about? If it's not talking about the globe, and I don't think it is, not talking about the entire earth planet, what do you think it's talking about?
Surrounding lands.
Right, the surrounding lands. So it's talking about the nations. So it's talking about Egypt. It's talking about Canaan. Maybe as far as Ur of the Chaldees, which will become the place of Babylon and things like that. So they're coming from distant places, but they're not coming from Jamaica to travel to Egypt. That's just not happening. And again, this is important because we're going to read passages in the scripture that are going to sound like it's talking about the whole earth, literally the whole earth, but it's not. Let me give you a couple scriptures to prove the point. So Jeremiah 51:7. So in Jeremiah 51:7, it's talking about Babylon. It says, Babylon was a golden cup in the Lord's hand, making all the earth drunken. The nations drank of her wine, therefore the nations went mad. That's not talking about the entire globe. The reality is Babylon did not rule the whole world. Babylon did not rule the whole world. It ruled that area. One more. Paul says this. He's talking about the gospel of Christ. And this is in the first century. He says, if indeed you continue in the faith, right? We're in the middle of an argument he makes. Stable and steadfast, not shifting from the hope of the gospel that you heard. He's talking about the gospel. He goes on to say, which has been, that's past tense, has already been proclaimed where?
All creation.
In all creation. Look at it. Under heaven. Now, did Paul not understand that people in Canada did not hear the gospel by the time he was writing Colossians? Do you think he was thinking that it was the whole globe? The answer is no. Paul, first of all, Paul wasn't stupid. Second of all, Paul is inspired. God knows that the whole earth had not heard the gospel yet, right? If you read church history, you'll see the gospel is going out to places. In fact, there are still places in the earth today, the globe today, that maybe have never heard the gospel or have only just heard it over the last few, let's say, maybe a few hundred years, something like that. So Paul is not saying, Jeremiah is not saying, and of course, back in Genesis, God, through Moses, is not saying that the whole globe, it's using this language to say, really, it's more like the known land, the known earth at that time, or the controlling empire. You'll remember that Babylon took over lots of nations and peoples, lots of area. So it'll talk about Babylon as controlling, the whole earth or something like that. It's really talking about the known lands. It's talking about that empire-wide area. Same in the New Testament. I'll give you another example. We won't go there, but I'll give you another example. You'll read in the Gospel of Luke that the governor gave a decree that the whole earth should take a census, that everybody should. It doesn't mean the whole earth, right? Rome did not control the entire globe, the whole planet, but it uses that kind of language. So I just want to point that out, that's important for us to kind of to think about This will be important for Bible study in the future. It'll be important for future Bible study. All right, any questions, thoughts, comments on that or anything in that section there? Okay, if there's nothing more, let's press on. We're going to go into 42, and we'll read verses 1 through 23. So chapter 42, 1 through 23. And I'll just throw it out again real quick if anybody wants to read that. Does anybody have a desire? Does anybody want to read those verses? Okay. I'll read it. So we're looking at verses 1 through 23. So it says this, when Jacob learned that there was grain for sale in Egypt, he said to his sons, why do you look at one another? He said, behold, I have heard that there is grain for sale in Egypt. Go down and buy grain for us there, that we may live and not die. So 10 of Joseph's brothers went down to buy grain in Egypt. But Jacob did not send Benjamin, Joseph's brother, with his brothers, for he feared that harm might happen to him. Thus the sons of Israel came to buy among the others who came, for the famine was in the land of Canaan. Now Joseph was governor over the land. He was the one who sold to all the people of the land. And Joseph's brothers came and bowed themselves before him with their faces to the ground. Joseph saw his brothers and recognized them, but he treated them like strangers and spoke roughly to them. Where do you come from? He said. They said, from the land of Canaan to buy food. Joseph recognized his brothers, but they did not recognize him. Joseph remembered the dream that he had dreamed of them, and he said to them, you are spies. You have come to see the nakedness of the land. They said to him, no, my lord, your servants have come to buy food. We are all sons of one man. We are honest men. Your servants have never been spies. He said to them, no, it is the nakedness of the land that you have come to see. And they said, we, your servants, are 12 brothers, the sons of one man in the land of Canaan. Behold, the youngest is this day with our father, and one is no more. But Joseph said to them, it is as I said to you, you are spies. By this you shall be tested. By the life of Pharaoh, you shall not go from this place unless your youngest brother comes here. Send one of you, and let him bring your brother, while you remain confined, that your words may be tested, whether there is truth in you, or else, by the life of Pharaoh, surely you are spies. And he put them all together in custody for 3 days. On the third day, Joseph said to them, do this, and you will live, for I fear God. If you are honest men, let one of your brothers remain confined, where you are in custody, and let the rest go and carry grain for the famine of your household. And bring your youngest brother to me, so your words will be verified, and you shall not die. And they did so. Then they said to one another, in truth, we are guilty concerning our brother, in that we saw the distress of his soul when he begged us, and we did not listen. That is why this distress has come upon us. And Reuben answered them, did I not tell you not to sin against the boy? But you did not listen. So now there comes a reckoning for his blood. They did not know that Joseph understood them, for there was an interpreter between them. All right, so a long section here, but what does Jacob do after he hears that there is grain in the land of Egypt? There's food there. What's he do?
Sends his sons to get some.
Yeah, he's going to send down his sons to get some. Who doesn't he send
Benjamin.
He doesn't send Benjamin. That's right. Why doesn't he send Benjamin?
He doesn't want anything to happen to him.
Yeah. He's afraid something might happen, right? They might come into some trouble, something like that. What happened to the last younger son who was kind of out with the brothers? As far as Jacob knows.
They sold him to the Ishmaelites.
Yeah, and as far as Jacob knows, his son is dead, right? In Jacob's eyes, he thinks Joseph is dead. So can he trust his boys to bring back the youngest?
No.
Doesn't seem to be like he can trust him, right? He doesn't seem to be trusted. Let me ask you this. Do we see that Jacob still has favoritism?
A little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. His other sons, who are not his favorite, right? Which wife gave birth to Joseph and Benjamin?
Reuben.
No, which wife gave birth to Joseph and Benjamin?
Which wife gave birth?
Rachel.
Oh,
Rachel did. Rachel did. Now, was Rachel his favorite wife?
Yes.
Yeah. The other boys can go down to Egypt. I mean, it really kind of shows he's got some favoritism here, but he has no problem sending the rest of his boys, right? Not to say that I think he wouldn't be, upset if something happens to him, but the baby is not going. The favorite is not going. The favorite of my favorite wife is not going down. So I think we still see some favoritism with Jacob. He's come a long way, though. If we remember the life of Jacob, he really has come a long way. But he's still being worked on. God is still needing to work on him. And in some ways, that's good news for us, too. That God has not given up on him or left him alone, even though he still has some of these, I would say, sinful behaviors. Showing favoritism and all of that. That's not good. That's a sinful behavior. So God is still working with him, and he's not given up on him. But here we see again the favoritism showing out, and Jacob is unwilling to let him go down. So who was in charge in Egypt over the food?
Joseph.
Joseph, right?
Joseph.
Yeah, these are trick questions, right? I'm not trying to trip you up, right? It's Joseph. Not a problem. So Joseph is in charge, and the brothers come down. They're going to buy food, and they meet Joseph, and they do what? What do they do when they meet Joseph?
Bow down.
What is being fulfilled?
Joseph's dream.
That's right, Joseph's dream. Now, do they know that Joseph's dream's being fulfilled? No, they have no clue. They have no clue. Does Joseph recognize what's going on?
Yes.
He does.
Oh yeah. Yeah, Joseph is remembering, he's recognizing, he recognizes his brother. So let me ask you this question. Why is it that Joseph could recognize his brothers, but they couldn't recognize him?
Well, they thought he was dead.
That's true. They thought he was dead.
Okay.
Why else?
There's a lot of changing that goes on between the ages 17 and 30.
Yeah.
Absolutely, right? He was a young boy at that point in time. There's a lot of changes that happen. You have to remember, not only has it been a long period of time, not only do they believe he's dead, those two things alone would be, some hurdles to get over for them to recognize him. But he also looks and sounds like an Egyptian, doesn't he? I mean, he would not have been allowed to look like a Hebrew shepherd and be the second in command over Egypt. He wouldn't have been that way. He would have been clean shaven. He would have had certain clothing on. He would have had his face and everything, his whole demeanor. Remember, he's been in Egypt for a very long time, and now he's in a position of authority. He needs to present himself in the proper way, in the proper customs and garb of the time. So he looks and he would have been speaking Egyptian, right? He wouldn't have been speaking Hebrew. He would have been speaking Egyptian. He's been there so long, he has to communicate with people in a thing, right? And it even says he's got an interpreter there, right? So he's speaking to them through an interpreter and all this kind of stuff. So it's no wonder that they don't recognize him. He looks different. He sounds different. They think he's dead anyways. They're not looking for Joseph. Now, why does Joseph recognize them?
Well, they were older to begin with, so there may not have been as much changes that have taken place.
Yeah, they were older. Yeah, absolutely.
And then when they travel together, I mean, there's 10 of them.
Yeah, and they probably would have looked pretty much the same, right? They would have been wearing the same clothing. It might have been new clothing, but it would have been the same kind of clothing, right? They would have probably had beards and all of that. They would have looked. I mean, you can see somebody 10, 20 years, you know, an adult, you know, you haven't seen somebody for 20 years. But if they look the same, you can recognize them pretty easily, right? They've got the same facial hair, all that kind of stuff. So it's not a mystery, right? If we really think about it, it's really not a mystery as to why Joseph recognizes them, but they don't recognize him. He's changed. He's transformed. He looks different. He sounds different. And he's dead in their eyes, right? So they're not looking to see him. On the other hand, the brothers all look and sound the same. You know, just their speech patterns, he probably would have picked up on, right? You hear somebody, you know somebody, you live with somebody, they have certain ways of speaking and all of that. All of that would have made sense to them, that he probably is picking up on all of that. So time has passed, but he can recognize them. Now, what does Joseph, or how does Joseph treat his brothers when he recognizes that it's them?
Kind of rough.
Yeah, it's rough. Absolutely. I think my translation even said that he spoke to them rough. Yeah, he recognized verse 8 there. He remembers the dream. Right there, verse 7. He treated them like strangers and he spoke rough to them, right? Why? Why doesn't he just come out and say, "Hey guys, it's me. Come here, let's hug it out. Let's have a great time." Why?
Oh boy.
Why not?
Because he wants Benjamin there.
Okay, he wants Benjamin there.
And his father too. I think, doesn't Jacob come back with him too?
Yeah, eventually, yeah. But he could have revealed himself to them and said, "Hey, bring down Benjamin, bring down Dad," all that kind of stuff, right? So
in dealing with, I was just going to say that the way that he interrogated them, he got information out of them.
That's right. That's right. He's getting information. What kind of men were these guys the last time he saw them?
Well, they came close to killing him.
Absolutely. He doesn't know what their character is. The last contact he had with them, they threw him in a pit. They were jealous of him. They were ruthless to him. They talked about murdering him. Some of the brothers wanted to kill him. Of course, they didn't, but Reuben steps in and says, and they plot or whatever, but then they sell them. These guys were ruthless, wicked. He needs to find out what kind of people they are. He's also not wanting to blow his cover because he wants to find out, is his brother Benjamin still alive? Is his father alive? He wants to get some information. So as Tim said, he's looking to get some information. And what kind of information does he get?
That his father's still alive and his little brother's still alive.
Absolutely. So he gets some good information. And again, he's not trying to blow his cover. So he's going to speak harshly to them for a couple reasons. First of all, if he treats them really well right off the bat, they might start wondering, why is this guy treating us well? I mean, these are foreigners, right? If you went in the ancient world, you went to another country, you went to another kingdom, another empire, and you're trying to buy food and stuff like that. Were there people from other empires that would try to come in and spy out your land and try to, take over? Was that something that happened?
It certainly did.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So if you're if you're the one in charge, you're going to check out people. You're not going to speak all kind and nice to them. There's going to be some interrogation probably that goes on if you don't know them. So part of what's going on here is he wants to get some information, and the way to do that is he has to act the part. He's an authority figure, and he also needs to recognize if these weren't his brothers, he would, possibly be treating other people this way too, speaking harshly. Who are you? Where do you come from? Are you trying to take over our land? You remember, Egypt is prosperous right now. Everybody has a famine, but Egypt is rich and wealthy. If you're another country, if you're another kingdom, and you know that this group has a lot of money, you might want to try to get in there and take it over, right? So that's all a possibility. So Joseph, he knows that these are his brothers, but he's gonna keep up this ruse, this act, this disguise, so that he can get some information out. Ultimately, he wants to find out what kind of people are these brothers of mine. So he gets all that information. Now, what time is it? Oh, we're up already. I don't know about you guys, but I feel like time just flew by. Let me ask this one question, and then we'll close it up. In verse 11, what did the brothers say? In verse 11.
We all have the same father.
Okay, and?
You're honest.
What? What? What is that? That should be like a massive, like what? We are honest men.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So, were they honest?
As I said, I never found Waldo.
I don't know. That might ring a bell in my mind if I were Joseph. We are honest men. I'd be thinking, last time I saw you, you were not honest men. So they're claiming something. Their past has not borne it out, but I find it very interesting. They're being interrogated. They're on the opposite side of things, aren't they? When they were in charge, they were the bullies. They spoke harsh to Joseph. Now the roles have been reversed, and they're saying, oh, we're honest men, you can trust us, all that kind of thing. Very, very interesting, the irony there. All right, last questions, comments, thoughts before we close it up.
No, I just think that closing thing is hilarious. That's all. I mean, it's really funny.
Yeah, Yeah.
I mean, it is.
Yeah, it is.
We're-
It's shocking. It's shocking. Okay, let's do this. Let's close in prayer. If nobody's got any last thoughts, comments, questions, concerns,